Hello everyone, welcome to what is technically an episode of From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we're going to take this episode to basically lay out what is to come from the projects that I'm involved with, given a lot of the changes happening with Star Wars continuity in the last few months here in the middle of 2014. It's an episode that if you don't care about these other projects I'm involved with or the future of this series, you might as well stop watching right now. We are not going to cover any individual new ideas, any individual new publications. If that's what you're looking for, jump to a different episode. But this is designed to sort of give you a sense of where things are going, because people keep asking, both on Facebook and YouTube, and it seems like no matter how many times I answer this, they keep asking. So my hope is that this can be the definitive way of saying, well, here's what I'm expecting going forward. So I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler, and we're going to look at this very quickly about what's happening in the near future with any of my stuff. The big impetus for this, of course, is the fact that in April of 2014, there was an announcement that basically said that the previous official continuity, made up of G canon, T canon, C canon, some of the S canon, just did an episode on all of that, if you want to go back and watch that, that continuity that we've taken as the continuity of Star Wars that Lucas could come in and squash, but often didn't, except for Clone Wars and a little bit with the prequels, that continuity is now considered an alternate universe known as the Legends continuity, or Legends timeline. And that going forward, the 6 Star Wars films, the 6 live-action films that already exist in their newest form, presumably, plus the Clone Wars film, plus the Clone Wars cartoon series, plus the Son of Dathomir comics, those are going to form the basis of a new continuity, in a sense, a new timeline, where everything is considered on par with the films, and which will build with new novels, new comics, new video games, the sequel trilogy, other movies coming from Disney, the Rebels cartoon show, and so forth. A clean break where the story group, including Leland Chee, Pablo Hidalgo, and others, will guide Star Wars continuity forward, trying to keep things more consistent than they were before, and making everything, including the films, work together. Finally having publishing on par with filmmaking, something Star Wars has never seen before. But what this has done is angered a lot of people, excited a lot of others, sort of pit the film purists and the EU, or Expanded Universe, or Legends continuity purists, kind of against each other in a lot of ways, and it's led to a lot of, for lack of a better term, strong feelings on both sides of the issue. And the question arose, since so many of the things that I do are tied into continuity, the Legends continuity now, what is going to happen going forward with my projects, especially ones that rely extra heavily on that as its focus. So I guess first of all, the future of this show, so that if that's all you care about, you can stop watching. Okay. From the Star Wars Library began months and months and months ago, and started in the era of the 1970s. And we've been looking at Star Wars publications in publication order as the continuity evolved that eventually became the Legends continuity. We looked at the early Del Rey novels, we looked at the early newspaper strips, the early Marvel comics, and it finally made it into the 1990s, looking at the first handful of books, the first handful of comics like Dark Empire. Now, I just put out the episode for The Last Command, the last book in the Thrawn trilogy, and it had been a while since I'd put out an episode, because I was sitting back trying to figure out what comes next. What are we going to do with this? I've mapped out episodes for From the Star Wars Library up through the 160 some odd episode mark, and even at that point, 20 some odd episodes from now, we'd only be in 1995 in terms of Star Wars publishing. It's a lot of episodes to cover some very short ground, so to speak. And my question was to myself, is it worth continuing that series, spending the time with it, spending the effort on it, for a continuity that now is no longer the one that is being built in most respects, outside of things like the Old Republic and Fantasy Flight Games as materials and such. And would producing that series in this environment engender a lot of blowback and idiocy from random YouTube responders who are basically going to be bashing the living crap out of the EU with the whole, see, it doesn't exist, eat crap, kind of stuff, kind of comments, which we get enough of with trolls on this series and elsewhere. So what do? My decision for this series is to put it on indefinite hiatus. Is it over? I don't know. I honestly don't know. If this series does come back, it'll pick up where it left off after Last Command. I will probably have to start denoting episodes as Legends continuity or the new canon, if they ever give that new canon a name. But at this point, it seems like of all the things that I'm doing, that would be very time-consuming, especially to catch up to the modern day. We're talking months and months, perhaps years of producing episodes of the show. And I'm not sure how relevant it is, or how confusing it might be to new viewers in relation to what they've done with the whole separation of two separate main continuities now. So as of now, as of the end of this episode, From the Star Wars Library, the one based on publishing, is on indefinite hiatus. It may return, it may not. If it does, it won't be anytime soon. So assume for now that that's about it. That's why I finished up The Last Command, because I wanted to at least round out the Thrawn trilogy stuff and not leave that hanging with its conclusion gone before kind of calling things to a halt. I'm not blowing up the car, but I'm certainly slamming on the brakes on the car on this one. So we'll see how that goes. From the Star Wars Home Video Library, which focuses on the different home video releases of Star Wars materials, that will continue, because that is not dependent upon one continuity over another. Now, there's not a lot left to cover in my collection. The next ones that'll be coming around the same time that these episodes are coming out will be the Lego Star Wars stuff. But as new things come out, as new things get added to my collection, periodically you will see new episodes of that series. It is also my hope with that series at some point to go through and digitize, if they're not already yet, all the different versions I have of the Star Wars films and create comparison videos like I did with the Clone Wars cuts, that shows all the different variants of the films. You know, here's a scene, here's the old version, the new version, the newer version, the even newer version, because Lucas kept changing his mind on what he wanted, on what his definitive vision was. That should all be coming from the Star Wars Library, or from the Star Wars Home Video Library, excuse me, though the whole comparison thing is probably quite a ways off. I'll do a few more little oddball items as regular episodes, then kind of step back from that series to produce those in the background, though that will take probably months, if not years, to complete. So that series continues. All the other things, like the reviews of the Fantasy Fight Games materials, those will continue as those new ones come in, so you're not missing that at all. Beyond all of this, in the realm of podcasting, we are still continuing with Star Wars Beyond the Films from StarWarsReport.com. Me and Mark Hurlman are still going to be producing that podcast, but now we'll talk about a little bit of everything. Legends continuity stuff, new continuity stuff, just general ponders about the saga itself, as Mark calls them, pondering different things about the saga. That is all going to be within our purview. It's beyond the films. It's not just one particular continuity. So that podcast will continue. You can continue checking that out. We put out recent episodes about Razor's Edge, about Republic Twilight, feedback on the canon announcement from listeners and so forth, and just general stuff like that at the moment. Now, Republic Forces Radio Network, which I was involved with, is pretty much over with. We ended technically with the Clone Wars film coverage back at the end of 2013, like November-ish of 2013. At which point, though, we announced that we were launching a new podcast, the Star Wars Report's Rebels Roundtable, to talk about Rebels. Then we got the Netflix release, and now a wider digital release, though not on home video yet, of the Clone Wars Season 6, or the Lost Missions. So we went back and produced another few episodes, 4 episodes, for Republic Forces Radio Network of that. There was also a lead-in, or a prelude, for Rebels Roundtable, released in both feeds. Though the Rebels Roundtable feed has more stuff in it, like little interviews with the members of the team, reports from WonderCon and their Rebels panel and that sort of thing. So, Republic Forces Radio Network, as of the time I'm recording this, and it's probably out by the time you're watching this, has 1 episode left to go. That is the episode in which we formally wrap things up with the coverage of the Yoda arc, the last 4 episodes of Clone Wars Season 6. And then that essentially, the door is closed, RFRN is gone, and those episodes also act as a prelude to Rebels Roundtable. That series is now new. It is ongoing. You can find it on StarWarsReport.com, RebelsRoundtable.com. I'll give you all the information underneath here, of course, because this is kind of a catching up on things type of episode. But that will be continuing going ahead. Most of the team has made the jump from Republic Forces Radio Network, but not Arnie or Jerry. So that means that Jonathan will still be the host and still be the one doing the editing. I'm back. Barrett's back, Jen's back, Dan's back, and Mark is now joining from Star Wars Beyond the Films. And we may work in other people from the Star Wars Report's 2nd Airborne Division, as they call it, group of podcasts at some point. So that's still going. Star Wars Beyond the Films is still going. Nothing is changing with those. Those are still following the same plans that they were following prior to the canon announcement. Website-wise, yes, I'm still running StarWarsFanWorks.com as a hub for the Star Wars fan audio community, but because of the lack of time that I have to work on that, you may have noticed in the last year or so, that has been significantly pared down. No longer does it have a ton of different sections and all kinds of other information. Now it's basically just a directory page to point you to audio dramas, podcasts, and audio parodies within the Star Wars fan audio community. It's still active, it's still there, and it's still going to be the place that hosts my Star Wars Timeline Gold. You can still go through there and find old episodes of podcasts of mine like Chrono Radio, The But Learniverse, Fan Audio Made Easy, stuff like that, and find links to a bunch of other podcasts and such. But that site has been pared down, even though it does still exist. It also now has its own Facebook page, so when there's news, it doesn't need a news page. You can just pop up on Facebook to check that one out. The big one, though, of course, that people were asking about is, what about the Star Wars Timeline Gold? My big chronology out there. The most comprehensive Star Wars chronology available anywhere in the world in any language, as far as we can tell. That project will continue, but there are some changes going along with it. Basically, what you're going to see happening with it, what had happened before, was that you had an appendices file that has sort of the oddball stuff, the in-canon or apocryphal timelines, timelines of publishing history and that sort of thing. That still is going to be around as it has been for a while. And there had been one timeline of the official continuity, now the Legends continuity, but that got so big it got split into two, Volume 1 and Volume 2. One for leading up to A New Hope, one for A New Hope, and onward. Those still exist, but they're being labeled as Legends Volume 1 and Volume 2 instead of the primary official continuity Volume 1 or 2, or Continuity Timeline Volume 1 or 2. They'll be called Legends now, of course, because that's what that timeline is called. The Clone Wars stuff remains pulled out into a Clone Wars supplement document because we have no way yet, an official way, to link together the old, about 2002 to 2008 Clone Wars continuity from the novels and the comics and such and the video games with the Clone Wars continuity of the TV show. They're meant to fit together, supposedly. They are both existing within the Legends continuity, but we have no idea how they're supposed to mesh together. So there's still two separate timelines in that Clone Wars supplement, only now it's known as the Legends Clone Wars supplement. And eventually, hopefully next year's edition, I will try to piece together a best fit timeline of that like I've had to do with other eras, because I doubt we're ever going to get an official one. But for now, there's just not the time to do anything like that. So they're still separate at this point. There's now, though, going to be a new document added into the mix. The Story Group Canon document. The Story Group-driven new canon document, and that will be just this new continuity that is being developed. I've already gone through the process of copying over the different summaries for the Clone Wars and the films and everything, going through them and editing them down to make sure they have no Legends continuity references, just the stuff from the films themselves. I'm going to be going through and rewatching the films and the Clone Wars, making sure all the time references are just from those and so forth. But that just means that that new continuity that's building will get its own separate document. So there will now be 5, unless I combine some of them before release, 5 different PDF documents, Adobe Acrobat files, within what you get from the Star Wars Timeline Gold. And I will now be setting them up not as a zip file, but as a zip file for those who want it, but then setting up the individual documents for access directly, so it's easier to go to the website, StarWarsFanWorks.com/timeline, click on the PDF and open it, and if you've got an Apple device, open it, say, in Adobe Reader or in iBooks, and bring that onto your device so you can easily download it and flip through your readers there instead of having to have something to unzip it to be able to do that in the first place, because some mobile devices can do that, some mobile devices can't. So we're taking away the zip thing unless you want to do it that way, in which case it'll be an option off to the side. So Star Wars Timeline Gold does continue, probably still with releases on a yearly basis, though I'd always love to do it more rapidly, but usually a year is about as best as I can do with the school year being so chock full each year and most of my work time on the timeline being during the summer, but that will still continue. But then you've got this thing that's sort of in the middle between that project and podcasting, and that is the Star Wars Expanded Universe Primer podcast that I do. There's an EU primer, and a Legends continuity, if you want to call it that now, primer in the appendices file of the Star Wars Timeline Gold. It catches people up on the overall saga so they can jump in anywhere into reading the novels, comics, and such, and know generally what's going on, the important points of what's going on. Years ago, I took that and turned it into a podcast series of 5 episodes, broken down, just reading that aloud. And every time a new edition of the Star Wars Timeline Gold would come out, I would update that primer in the document, update my recording of it, and edit together to update the episodes of the podcast and re-release them online. That, I think, now is not necessary in podcast form, because the continuity won't continue to grow all that much, and I don't want to confuse people of thinking they need to know that to understand what else is going on with Star Wars continuity. So the primer in text form will continue in the Timeline Gold's appendices file. The EU Primer podcast will not be updated. It's done. And basically, it will disappear. It will not be promoted, won't be put online, except for being able to be in the archives, listed as being now out of date on StarWarsFanWorks.com. There's no point in continuing that, I think, at this point. That is the one big casualty, aside from, in a sense, from the Star Wars library being put on hiatus. The Primer podcast is the big casualty of the canon announcement for the different projects that I am involved with. So with that all being said, where you can find this all, I'll just kind of put it all up bit by bit here, and then we'll call it a day. If you want to check out the Star Wars Timeline Gold, you can find it and its Facebook page and so forth at these locations. If you want to check out Star Wars Beyond the Films, the podcast, you'll be able to find it here. If you want to check out Rebels Roundtable, the Star Wars Report's Rebels Roundtable, our new podcast dealing with the Rebels show, that you can find at these places. For the directory of all those different Star Wars podcasts, fan audio dramas, and fan audio parodies, of course, StarWarsFanWorks.com, you can find it here. And lastly, if you want to check out any of the videos like this one, well, you pretty much already know where to find those if you're watching this, right? But you can find them all on the YouTube channel, which is located here. So things are changing, but think of it more as cutting the fat, becoming more efficient, and prioritizing. I'm not going anywhere, the timeline's not, and some of the videos aren't, most of the podcasts aren't. But there's some things that just need to go, and they might have eventually gone by the wayside anyway. But the canon announcement certainly shifted things enough that some things did indeed fall through the cracks created by that canon earthquake. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for your interest in these projects, if you've watched this all the way through and suffered all the way through it. May the Force be with the readers. In case this series does not come back, thank you for watching From the Star Wars Library. I will see you in future videos of From the Star Wars Home Video Library and elsewhere, and make sure to catch up with me on Facebook at either my writer page, my page, or any of the other pages that have previously been mentioned. You can also follow me on Twitter at SWFanWorks. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Good night.